Today we're doing chapters 7, 8, and 9, and we're going to start with chapter 7, electricity. And Lieutenant Jim Hargraves here. He's with the Fire Marshal's office. He's a lieutenant in the Investigations Division. He has about 15 years, 17, 18 years, I think, in the fire service and police service. And he's done everything from patrol to firefighting to investigations and inspections, all of the above. But he's definitely an expert in his field, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him. Okay, so here you go, Jim.
Howdy, everybody. Like Norm so eloquently put, I'm the lieutenant with the Investigations Division. Little bit of my background: I have a degree in electrical design and instrumentation. I spent 12 years in oil and gas doing mechanical drafting and all of that. I've got a fairly decent knowledge of electrical circuits. I'm by no means an electrician, but I can definitely pick out what looks good and what doesn't. So the easiest way I can tell you how to think of electricity is think of it like water. Okay. Water flows in a pipe. If there's an obstruction, it speeds up. If it's a bigger pipe, it slows down. Same thing happens in electricity. Very, very large cable has very, very low resistance. Very, very small cable has very, very high resistance. I'm sure when y'all read in your book, you heard of the term AWG, which is a wire gauge. It's an American wire gauge, and you'll see numbers like 16, 14, 12, all the way up to 1, and then it goes into zeros. Now, you would think in normal terminology, if it's a 0, that would be a small cable. It's not. It's actually a very, very large cable. They call that 1/0 gauge wire. It's a very, very big wire, and it goes up from there. And then as the number gets bigger, the wire gets smaller. Everybody tracking me on that? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. Has anybody reviewed the website and done there's a picture of the hair dryer. Have y'all done that assignment yet? Okay. Did anybody find that difficult at all?
I thought it wasn't too challenging with the formulas in front of me. At this point, I don't have those formulas memorized, but with the formulas, it wasn't too bad.
Sure. Anybody else have any difficulty with that assignment? I take that as a no.
That was pretty forward.
Pretty forward. Okay, great. All right. Any questions y'all have on electricity? I'm open to. I don't want to just keep monopolizing the time.
As far as the state test and such, are we going to be expected to have all those formulas memorized?
I would know basically how to get the information. Okay, so there's several of those formulas, but I'd at least know what voltage is, what current is, what resistance is, and what power is. But on the state test, it's going to be fairly straightforward. They're not going to ask you anything crazy like asking for a square root or anything like that.
Okay.
They have a question on the homework. We had to find wattage, correct? So we used basically Ohm's law, but we replaced it with wattage versus volts, correct?
Okay. Yeah, so I think there was one where you had to find the amperage when you were given wattage and voltage.
Yes, that's what I was talking about.
Okay. So for that one, the two knowns on that is you have a power output, which is a wattage, and you have a voltage input, which is volts, right? So most of your standard household electric is 120 volt, okay? So when you have your voltage and you have your wattage, you're looking for amperage, and amperage or you're looking for current, and current is represented by the letter I. Okay, and so for that one, you would simply divide your wattage by your voltage. So you take the larger number, divide it by your smaller number, and you get a number. So in this case, it was 1200 divided by 120, and that'd give you 10 amps. So that appliance and that specific appliance draws 10 amps when used.
Well, good. That was the answer I got. So.
Okay. And you understand that most outlets, right? So if they're a duplex outlet, that means there's two outlets there. Those are only rated for 20 amps at a time. So if you've got 6 things plugged in at a time, and you're drawing 10 amps, you could be drawing 60 amps through that circuit, and it's not rated for that. So say for instance, if you had a hair dryer and a microwave, and you turned them both on at the same time, what would you expect to happen?
And you trip the circuit.
That's it.
On some mobile homes, don't they even wire that at 15?
Yeah. So mobile homes are a little different animal, because they do have residential wiring, but they're wired really funky. So yeah, you could be as low as 15 amps on a receptacle. Any further questions on that, or anything y'all might have? Just review your Ohm's law and those formulas, and y'all will be good. They're fairly easy to know. And y'all know the difference between AC and DC, what alternating current and direct current is. Direct current's your vehicle. That's a 12 volt system, and your house is rated on a alternating current where it flops between positive and negative charges. Y'all good with that?
Yeah, I think we got it.
Okay. As far as it goes, all of your electrical systems, especially in commercial systems or in nursing homes, hospitals, and things like that, even your residential thing, everything falls under the NEC 7 or NFPA 70, which is a national electric code. It's why it's really important if you're having something, even though your sister's brother's cousin might be an electrician, always good to find out that that they're licensed and bonded to perform that work. Because too often some houses have aluminum wiring in there, and the receptacles for an aluminum wired house are about $4 to $5 a receptacle versus 35 cents at Home Depot for a copper wire. So a lot of folks will just go in and say, oh, this plug's bad, and they'll just go grab the 35-cent receptacle at the local hardware store and plug it in, and then wonder why their house caught on fire. But that's why, because one's set up for copper and one's set up for aluminum. So it's really important to know what your house is wired, and that's where a licensed and bonded electrician comes into play to make that determination. and y'all are aware that your most residential applications, you have aerials, which have an overhead entrance, or a lateral, which is an underground entrance. Most newer constructed homes, they use all buried cable, and they're all run underground. So that's how that happens. Anybody else have any other questions?
Come on, guys, this is supposed to be two-way.
If y'all read in your books, y'all seen where they have circuits and junction boxes and things like that. It's always good to, when you're doing an investigation, to look at the junction boxes to see how many circuits they have made up inside that circuit. A good electrician will size the conduit to the size of the to the amount of circuits that they're going to have in there. So if you see one out in the field and you open that junction box and you see a whole jumble of wire in there, the odds are pretty good that they've overloaded that conduit and that there's too many circuits, because wire also heats up. Because what do we know about metal when it heats up?
It expands?
Yes. So all conduit is sized for a certain amount of conductors, okay? So which means that they can only run a certain amount of wire in that conduit to allow for thermal expansion inside that conduit. So if you see a conduit and it's full of wire, it has no place for that heat to go. So over time, that heat will cause the thermal insulation to break down. It could melt. It could cause overloads. It could cause short circuits. It could actually cause arc faulting inside the box, and it could provide a source of a fire in that when it arcs, it'll arc into the metal conduit and then warm the conduit up, and then it'll catch whatever combustibles are at hand on fire as well. So something to consider when you're out looking at things and you're seeing things.
What's the difference between like a ground and a neutral?
So a ground is directly to the earth.
Okay.
So that's where you'll also hear it called bonded. You'll hear that the panel's bonded. Okay. All that means is that panel is, all the neutrals of that panel are hooked into one cable, and that one cable is bound to the ground strap, either by the sewer pipe, which me and Norm were talking about, or it's actually going to an actual ground rod that's buried in the ground.
Yeah, that's cool. So you're saying that they are pretty well the same thing? You can use those terms universally?
So you cannot. So you'll see that there's a 3-wire connection, right?
Right.
Okay. So you have a hot side, which is usually white.
Okay. Yeah.
The neutral, which is usually black, and then a bare wire, which is the ground. Okay. So the ground goes right back to the ground strap in the panel. Then that goes to ground. The neutral, however, is how the alternating current switches back and forth. So as it's going through, as that generator's rotating at the generating plant, it gets to one side and it's hot, and then it switches over to neutral, and it switches back and comes. So you got that wave that was talked about on. I just had it. It's on page 189, and it talks about how the voltage goes up and down, and it talks about the sine wave. But your neutral is not. You wouldn't connect all of your neutrals to the ground strap. That has you have a neutral bar, you have a positive bar, and then you have the neutral. Then you have the ground strap, the grounding bar as well.
Okay, because like on page 198, it kind of uses those. The ground and the neutral bar is the same.
Yeah, let me refer to that. Yeah, that's what I was referring to as the ground bar. So your ground bar will go to your ground, but those will also come out as your.
It looks like it's connecting both the ground and the neutral there to that bar, which therefore, I guess that top so-called cable, it would be what goes to Earth.
Yeah. So that's your service entrance off the top on that page, and then you see your breaker, and then you have your hot side and your grounds.
Hey, Norm, this is Brad Britton. Sorry I was late.
You're good. Trying to see how the yeah, that's not a real good. That's not a real.
Because
good
in that picture, it sure does look like the neutrals and the grounds both go to the exact same spot.
Yeah, and they do. There's if you go on Google, let me see if I can get a better picture of one. All right, I got a better picture for you. So you see here, you see that this main wire here.
Yes, that top left black one.
Right, and then you see the lug. You see that big lug that it's this lug right here.
Yes.
That's your ground lug, okay. And then your ground wire is tied to that, and then all your ground wires for your circuit are wired to that bar in the back. You see that?
Okay, then where's your neutrals?
Those are your neutrals. Your white should be. Did I get that backwards? Okay. So in this wiring diagram, your white is your neutrals, and then they're using red. They're using reds as the hot.
Okay, I'm sorry. Then where's your would be your bare wire?
So that you would see the greens that are here. You see your green wires here?
Okay, is that the same as what we're typically
That
whenever
would
you
be your bare wire, yeah.
Yeah, because I think your standard Romex, is your 3-wire.
Yeah. It's like.
So where was that green wire going to?
No idea on that one.
Because in your panel you should have the junction for all 3 wires, correct?
Yeah. So you have another strap here.
Okay, so that strap on the right, is that not the same ground as the strap in the top left? I'm sorry, I'm getting confused, but I'm not understanding either.
Yeah. So the one takeaway for this is not I'm not a licensed electrician, okay? So every house is wired basically. Every house you come in contact with is going to be different, okay? So if you've got your bare wire in your panels, they should go to Earth. Your bare wire should always go to Earth. So you'll just have to look at you have to look and see what your panel is that you're looking at, and that's what you're going to have to determine. Is that when you see that, you're going to have to look and see which side is which, because every house is different. So like some might have Federal Pacific boxes, some might have Square D, some might have General Electric, and all of that. So, and all of them are different. So you just have to kind of see, because like in my house, for instance, all of my bare wire are on a separate lug, and then all my hot and all my neutrals are on I've got three spots for them to hook into. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, sort of.
I know it's kind of confusing, okay, but the main thing is that if you look at a panel and it looks like it's jacked up, photograph it, document it, and then let the power company or the electrician that's going to come out, and they'll make a final determination. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Bring in the
Okay.
expert.
So, because I mean, we could get really in the weeds on how to wire a panel, and I'm not here to tell y'all how to wire a panel. That's not what this is about. But I know that the book shows that they do wire in together, and there are some times that they have a ground strap where the ground rod goes right to the neutral bar, and then goes out to ground. So that's how that's run. And then there's some that have a separate bar that they run all the bare wires to, but they're also connected to that ground wire, and they go to ground as well. But what you really want to look for in that panel is you want to see evidence of arcing or melting of breakers or missing breakers. Okay. Things like that. Don't touch an energized panel. If we have our hot sticks, if it still shows live, don't touch it. Leave it be. Let the power company come out and disconnect it, and then examine it that way. But if you open the box and it's got no protective cover, and you look in and all the wires are all jumbled together, document it. Take a picture of it. Say it doesn't look right in your documentation. And then when you talk to your private guy who's going to get a forensic electrical engineer involved, you can tell him what your observations were. Does that make sense?
That makes
better sense now.
Okay. Sorry. Because you can look at that bottom on that same page on 198, and you can see the old style cartridge fuses, and you'll see that it looks totally different than the one that's on the top left on that page as well. So you may come into contact with something that has fuses rather than circuit breakers as well. You see what I'm saying, Adam?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Because you can see that one kind of lends to the question that you had, where it has that one bare wire, and then it's going out that way.
And I guess that bare wire in that case would probably just be daisy chained on the other end,
Yeah, it looks that way.
because there's only one wire coming in, but yet there's two positives.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Now, is it fused on the ground and the positive there? Because I see a white and a black wire to the fuse.
Yeah,
Or is that two separate circuits?
I think it might be. It looks like it's two separate circuits.
Man, you better know on the other end how it's wired.
Yeah, and this is my point, is like you'll see stuff like this, okay? When you're investigating and things like that, you would take a picture of that and document that, well, there's a fuse missing one, right? It's in the up position, so it's powered. And then there's just something that doesn't look right with it, right? So you could document that in your report, and then get with the when the privates come out to take a look at it, they can get you you can discuss your findings that way. That happens a lot. Happens quite a lot. But the main thing you want to look into in that panel is you want to look for things that are missing, things that are showing signs of melting, things that are if you've got arcs in there that you see little you'll see black soot on those. You'll actually see you'll actually see the bus bar that runs in the middle of that. You'll actually see that they're actually they've degraded over time, and they've actually burned through, so they're not making a good connection, and they're just, every time a appliance kicks on, it's causing a small arc in that inside that circuit breaker. Any other questions on that? I know we got kind of in the weeds on that one, but
On page 201, when it starts talking about GFIs and such, I know it's pretty common practice to, I don't know the terminology, daisy chain them together and take advantage of one GFI.
yes.
What should we look for in reference to that? Is there a number of how many plugs you can daisy chain through that one GFI, or?
So now with new electric code, I believe that they all have to be on a separate. They have to be on a separate circuit. So meaning that you can't have, like in my house, for instance, when it was wired in the 80s, ground fault circuit interrupters were about $20 a piece. So they put one GFCI in my spare bathroom, and then ran every bathroom and all of my kitchen and the 2 plugs that were outside through that one GFCI.
All right.
So there's really not a limit. It just comes to it's how their amperage rating is on that box. So there's really no real it just says how that electrician decided to wire that house that day. Yeah, I know, it's nuts. I have GFCIs in all of my appliances in my kitchen and in both bathrooms now. So but if I still trip that one in that spare bathroom, it'll knock out all those other ones as well. But it's just like with anything now. The new one is arc fault circuit interrupters, or AFCIs. So, and those are wired into the panel. So
I've heard bad things about those.
Yeah, and so for fire alarms they're required, but I mean, it's supposed to sense when an arc fault happens, and it's supposed to cut out immediately. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a mechanical device, and it's subject to failure. So something to keep in mind when you're investigating those types of fires. What else could I help y'all with? Oh, here, I got on page 200, it talks about that panel. Maybe this might help. In modern construction, the entire electrical system from the service entrance through all of the branch circuits is grounded. Fire investigators may find 2-wire ungrounded branch circuits in older homes. In newer systems, one of the 3 connectors that provide the service is a ground wire, normally bare. The panel board is grounded by connecting the panel to the electric utility neutral, the grounded connector, and as a backup to a grounding rod driven into the ground near the service entrance, metal underground water pipe, or metal frame of a building. So
when I read that, I kind of interpret them
yeah,
as a secondary, like they're one and the same.
I would read that the same way as well.
Okay, that was kind of adding to my confusion because,
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, redundant systems, that's a good thing, but yes, that's kind of what I read that as being a redundant system.
And I guess I wasn't real clear in explaining that, and I apologize. But the main thing is that it is a loop, and you want it to, if it fails, you want it to go to ground. You always want it to go to ground. So that's why that's set up. And you were correct in saying that they were used interchangeably.
And the service coming in pretty much off the pole
Mhm.
does not include a ground or a neutral, right?
There's 2 wires coming into the service panel.
Right. But those are just 2 phases, right?
Yes.
So those are both.
Unless you're running a 3-phase in your house, and then we can go off on a different tangent on that one.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Any other questions on that? You do know that sharp bends in wire cause resistance heating, and that most houses that were built, even in today, they use metal straps. They look like they have 2 sharp ends. It's got a flat end, and they nail it into the wood, and it smushes the wire into the wood. If they're not real careful about that, they'll nick the insulation, and that'll cause an arc path over time, and it could cause a fire in that thing. Now they're starting.
Is that kind of similar? Sorry, is that similar to using like the staples on the Romex?
Yep, absolutely. So now in newer construction, you'll start to see the plastic. They'll still have 2 nails and a plastic shroud in between them. Looks like a plastic U, and they'll nail that into the wood, and so that way they don't get hit. So yeah, so that's that. Always a good thing to look at when you're investigating a fire is to look at the electrical service. Look at it. Is it thermal damage, or is there something that you can see on the wood where it arced? It'll leave like a saddle burn. It'll look like a U. And then usually right next to it will be a metal strap. And so you'll see that it'll be discolored in some way, shape, or form. That could be where your fire started. You just have to you document where you see that, and then move on down the circuit path.
Maybe a little off in the weeds here, but is there any way to tell if the fire caused the short or if the short caused the fire? If that kind of makes sense, if it's secondary damage?
Yeah. So realistically, what you want to look at is you want to try and rule out everything from, and as an investigator, you're going to want to rule out whether it's intentional or unintentional, right? That's the 2 main causes. Was it an accident or was a crime committed? That's where we need to be at. Looking at that, you can use something called arc mapping, and you can see where the circuits actually broke, and there'll be like beading on the end. You can refer to 921 for this, and you'll see beading or arc beading and it'll look like the wire's separated, right? So you'll have to determine whether did the fire start over in the corner and then burned up and then burned through the electrical and then caused the short, or is the short the cause of that fire? And that you use arc mapping to determine that. But if you're leaning towards that path, then you'll use those types of things. And then all your information out of this chapter will tell you how the circuits run. So if you have a light switch on the wall and the circuit runs to the light bulb, and the light bulbs all burn out and the housings all burn out, then you want to inspect that to see if there's any forms of any arcing or sparking or any damage to that, and then move back along that circuit to see if there's any breaks or anything like that. And then as you find those breaks in there, you're going to have to find out where, and then that'll tell you where the fire was, and it'll lead you right back to where the fire started. And it'll tell you whether, if it started on the ground or if it was in the circuit itself. That's a more advanced, you're going to cover that in a little bit in a later chapter, correct? Yeah. So y'all get to that. Anything else on electrical?
I can't think of anything.
All right. Adam, you good?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
No problem. I don't want to leave anybody confused. If anybody's confused, let's go ahead and talk it out.
I'm good on that.
Okay. Norm, you got anything to add?
I'm good as well.
All right. So chapter 8, investigative process. Any questions on that I could help y'all with? First point in the scientific method is to identify the problem or be notified of a problem. If they're calling us, we got a fire, correct? All right.
That's correct.
On the right of entry, obviously, if there's a fire and we still have person inside, then we pretty well have right of entry, correct?
Yes. You have an
Okay.
exigent circumstance to investigate the fire. You've been
Right.
requested by a fire department and or the persons that a fire investigation needs to occur.
Okay. Being that I'm not a peace officer, once I suspect possible arson, now what?
You notify the fire marshal's office in the county or municipality of which you reside. If you live in Harris County in the unincorporated area, you contact us and we'll come out.
Right. We typically use the state fire marshal's office on that sense. But I guess I stop all operations and pack up my toys and secure the scene. Would that be your route on that?
And stay there. So because if you're making the request, if your fire department or your agency or whoever you're responsible for is making that determination that a crime has been committed, then it is your responsibility to hold that scene and preserve it, to not allow any access until the fire investigator or arson investigators arrive. Now that's not to say that while we're en route, it could be an hour or 2 hours. If you're using the state, it could be up to 4. That, as wind changes or as things progress, the fire may rekindle. Okay, you can put the fire out. You just need to be sure to tell the investigator all of the suppression activities that you did up to and including their arrival. See what I'm saying?
Okay.
So, it could be as simple as, yeah, we arrived on scene and the fire was mostly on the 2nd floor and it was burning end to end. And we extinguished the fire starting from the left and worked to the right, or alpha side to bravo side, or however your determination is. And then, you know, you could say we did a coordinated attack. We came in from the front and the back and went upstairs and put the fire out. And then when you're fighting fire, you know, you'll say we experienced the greatest body of fire in the CD corner or the AB corner, and when we were putting it out, it didn't seem like it wanted to go out, and it took a lot of operations to get it out. So those are things that you would tell the investigator. Also, too, any type of you know, it's like, oh, when we walked into that room, there were 7 cans of gasoline in there. Okay, that's a pertinent. Leave them there, but you know, extinguish the fire as best you can, and try and recreate the scene as best you can when that investigator arrives.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
I have kind of an odd question. I feel like I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I know if, let's say, for some reason, everybody leaves the scene before you get there, you have to get a search warrant. You get the search warrant. Search warrant's good for 3 days. Let's say that I go to a fire scene to do an investigation, and everybody's left room, and I go back with the search warrant. The search warrant's only good for 3 days, not including the day of issuance and the day of execution.
Correct.
If I'm going to be there for 5 or 6 days, do I fall under the guidelines of the search warrant, or do I fall under, okay, now as long as I leave somebody on scene, I can drag this out as long as I need to?
So it's all in how the search warrant is written. It's all in how you interpret it to the judge that's granting that warrant. If it's going to take you, if once you get there on your original search warrant and you see that it's going to take you longer or going to require more resources, then you'll have to leave somebody on scene and get an additional search warrant for the amount of time you estimate that it's going to take you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's to be the safest bet, rather than getting to the minutia of those things. If it's only good for 3 days and you're going to take a week, go back, leave somebody on scene, get it rewritten so that you can have the amount of time you need to conduct your investigation.
Good deal. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Also, too, on that, Cody, just be sure that when you're doing that you explain that in detail of what you're doing, because most of the time DAs or judges don't understand fire investigations and don't understand the complexities involved. So it becomes apparent on you to make sure that you're giving them the correct information, so that it covers not only you but your agency and all the parties involved.
Good deal. Got it.
So let me ask you this. Let me throw a question out there, and anybody can chime in. When you obviously y'all have read about the scientific method and how it says you have to identify the problem or recognize the need, define the problem. You've collected data. Collecting data is your investigation. That's everything that you see, everything that you've done, all your pictures, all of the things that are necessary to conduct the investigation. You're going to analyze that data. You're going to look at it, right? Now, what would develop a hypothesis mean to you? And anybody, it's opened up for a question to anybody.
To me, it'd be getting an educated guess to maybe what might have happened or what didn't happen.
Okay. That's a good point.
I would
To me,
say,
it would be. Oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
To me, it would just be gathering all the information you found and just pretty much like what Norm said, and just try to get the best out of from all the information you found from the scene.
Good.
I would say develop a differential diagnosis of what's going on, like 3 different things that could have possibly happened, and rule them out.
I like how you put that, Jonathan. That's a good point, because you have four classifications. It's getting ready to change in NFPA 921 in the 2021 edition, and the classifications are: you've got accidental, intentional, act of nature, and undetermined. Right. So you got 4 classifications. So by Jonathan's reasoning, okay, you're trying to put you've got four things up, right? So you're like, okay, well, can I rule out accidental? Okay, well, going back to our electrical class, I looked at all the circuits. I did arc mapping. I did this. I looked at this. I asked the homeowner if they'd had any problems with their wiring, if any lights were flickering, or had they had any shorts. You know, had there been a recent electrical storm, not necessarily a thunderstorm, but just an electrical storm that pops up from time to time here in Southeast Texas, where we just get lightning and no rain. You know, was it that Dad was rewiring a circuit and got the wires mixed up, and then when they plugged in the toaster, it caught all the stuff next to the stove on fire? So that's you ruling out that accidental cause. You know, going into the room where I said we had 7 cans of gasoline, pretty good indicator that gasoline cans should not be in a bedroom, right? Can we get a head nod? Yeah.
Right.
Not for gasoline cans in our bedrooms, right? Now there are some people that put motorcycles in their front living rooms. Hey, I can't stop people from making improper decisions, but these are clues that lead us to developing that hypothesis. Okay, so a good rule to think about in undetermined fires: you have first fuel ignited. Okay, you have the ignition source and the actor agency that brought them together. Okay, if you cannot determine the first fuel ignited, and you can't determine the ignition source, and you can't put the 2 together, that fire is undetermined, and that happens. Okay, but you've also ruled out all the other possibilities until you come down to that conclusion. So that's a good rule to remember on undetermined fires: is you got to know your first fuel ignited. Well, in a house fire, there's wood, there's furniture, there's all sorts of things. So we can have the first fuel ignited, but if we don't have an ignition source and the actor agency that brought them together, we do not have we have an undetermined fire.
Understood.
All right. So then after we've developed it, we've got to test it, right? So we've got to test this theory. What would a good test be for your theory? And I'm not saying like go out to the burn field and actually put a microwave and put some metal in it and turn it on. But what I'm saying is like, what would be a good test in your mind that you could say, okay, here's all my things, I've got all this data, I've developed a hypothesis, now I want to test it. What would be a good test? Or how would you test that hypothesis?
Find other reports of similar incidents.
Okay. But on scene, how would you test it on scene? How would you test what you've seen to get you to your final determination? Jonathan, I know you're in hazmat, and I can see your wheels turning. Think about it like a fire, right? Or a hazmat spill, right? You've already collected all your data. You've done your testing. You've done everything you got now we need to move. How do we test to make sure what we need to contain? Like it's an ammonia leak. What would we test to determine what things we would need to contain that leak?
We would use meters,
Okay.
stuff like that, in order to track where the leak is coming from, or if we didn't know what the substance is, using something like a hazmat ID, something to detect, or get in the same realm of what the chemical actually is.
Sure.
But as far as what you're talking about, how to test a theory of how something actually started on fire in order to connect the dots. I'm trying to figure that out. I'm trying to figure that out in my head without damaging evidence or.
You're tracking. You're giving me all the right answers. So yeah. So that's what you're testing. You're going back and you're looking at all of the things, and if you can reasonably go, okay, this is what probably happened. Okay, now we need to test it, right? So if I'm saying that it's a discarded cigarette inside of a trash refuse container inside a garage in the back corner, okay, now I need to test and see, is this probable or possible? Okay, well, I got to know what container it was. So then I would lead the interview and go, hey, homeowner, what did y'all have in that corner? Oh, it was a plastic trash can. What did y'all have in it? Oh, I had rags and stuff like that. Okay, what type of rags were you throwing away? Oh, I was cleaning my carburetor and I threw the rags in the trash can. Oh, okay. So now I can test that now it's most probable that by him throwing that cigarette in that trash can that had all of those rags that had that vapor, right? And that cigarette smoldered on those rags, it then caught fire. That vapor then ignited, melted the trash can, spread out, and then caught the rest of the garage on fire. So now I'm looking at now I know that's where my origin was. I know where our cause was. I know where everything was at. And so now I've tested it to say, yes, that is probable, because we know that gasoline vapor is pretty much a vapor anywhere between minus 35 and 200 degrees. Yeah. So, I mean, so it's possible, because our temperature range here in Southeast Texas doesn't get much below 19 degrees. So we know we still got vapor. We know we've got rags in a closed confined space, and we've got an ignition source. So now what do I've got? I've got my first fuel ignited. I've got my ignition source, discarded smoking material, accidental. Now I've got the actor agency brought them together, the discarded smoking material in the trash can. There you go.
I get it. So you're gonna interview the person, kind of trend and figure out what they were doing at the time the fire started. What do they do as a hobby, or what were they doing in the area? Absolutely. So if they're cleaning wood, if they like woodworking, so we'd be looking for something like, hopefully he's gonna say linseed oil. I threw a whole bunch of towels soaked in linseed oil in the corner of the garage. I didn't know what would happen.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
So your initial interview is going to be like, hey, what were you doing up to in this? And they're going to be full of shock and everything. They're not going to give you really good information. But as you've gone through and you've dug out your fire and you've got where your point of origin is, and you see all your patterns and everything's pointing you back to this trash can, you can then go back to your subject, your resident, and go, what did you have in that back corner? Oh, that was my trash can. What were you throwing away in there? Oh, I threw you see what I'm saying? And now that hypothesis that you had that it was possibly accidental, now it's tested. Now we have now we bring it to fruition, and now we have a final where we've now got the final hypothesis, which is we have the rags in the trash can that caught on fire. We have the discarded. We have the smoking material, which is our ignition source. The actor agency brought them together, discarded in that trash can. And that's your investigative process in the quickest and most concise way I can put it.
Makes sense.
going back to your legal rights of entry, you can also request a consent. So you can get your forms and you can get your consent from the owner of the property. That could be a landlord. That could be the person that has the rental contract. That could be the person that has the overall responsibility of that property. So you can also get a consent to search form, and that'll also give you another avenue as far as using a search warrant as well.
On that consent aspect, if it's a leased property, who gives the consent, the property owner or the leasee?
So that gets to be a gray area, because the leasee or the property owner has ultimate right to the property. However, they don't have free will to come and go as they please unless it's written into their contract that they can come in and do maintenance or do spot checks. So the best thing to do is to get consent from the actual tenant, and also get consent from the landlord.
So you're saying get both?
Yep.
Okay. What if one of them disagrees? Can the landlord trump the leasee?
So in that case, then you can trump everything and just go get a search warrant and use the fact that you have to conduct a fire investigation.
So just remember, your search warrant, you're looking for specific items. Not you have to be able to name what you're looking for.
Yep.
So if we're just doing a cause and origin investigation and the leasee says, I don't even want you in here, but the property owner is like, what caught on fire? Now what?
So in that regard, then you would have to, then if you're just barred access, right? But your leasee or your landlord is saying, hey, I want you to do that, then you would have to get a search warrant and say that you would have to specifically say that you conduct a cause and origin fire investigation, and you're being limited by the tenant.
And can a non-peace officer request or write up a search warrant?
So in that respect, since if that's the case, then you would refer it back to the fire marshal's office that has jurisdiction in your area, and let them handle the legal side of that. But that would be something you would tell them that, hey, they're barring us access from this.
You can sit out on the street and see if they take anything out.
Yeah, you could do that too.
What was that, Norm?
Is that you could watch them if you're sitting there and you're watching the property, you could watch to see if they take anything out, and if they do, then that's cause enough for the law enforcement side to get involved and say they're spoliating the evidence of the scene.
It's changing it to exigent circumstances.
Yep. Any other things dealing with the investigative process? Anybody got any questions, comments, concerns, worries?
What can you do if you can't find a property owner? I know you can go with the appraisal district and find out who owns the property, but if John in Oklahoma owns the property that I'm at, how do I go about tracking that person down?
All right. So this happened on a case I was working with another investigator, and this exactly happened. A dentist office had purchased a plot of land. At the back of their property was an abandoned, it was an office building, but it wasn't being used by anybody. It was pretty much where homeless folks would come in and they would flop out and sleep and whatever. Well, somebody started a fire inside that building. So we came out, we tried to find the landowner, couldn't find the landowner and all that. So we investigated the fire and we continued in our investigative process. Week later, another building on that property caught fire as well. And so now I've got 2 fires within a week of each other. Now I've got something, you know, now this has gone from, well, it could have been discarded smoking material because of the vagrants and the way they piled trash, and they could have been careless. Now I've got another building on the same property that's caught fire. Well, in that one, the fire department, while they were out, actually saw the suspect run out of the building while it was on fire. They stopped him. The guy said he had a gun. They let him go. We actually found him, you know, identified him. He didn't have anything, couldn't say anything, didn't do nothing. We couldn't find the owner still for this property. Had no choice, but had to let him go. An hour later, the owner of the property called us and said, "Hey, I'm the owner of the property and I want to pursue charges." Okay. So then that started a 12-hour process of looking for this guy. Couldn't find him. We knew he was in the area. We knew what he looked like. We knew his name. We actually had a video still of him. So our night shift guys went to a local gas station that had a bunch of 8-liners in there because the guy liked to do what he called ping. They found him. They were able to identify him through the descriptions we gave him. We were actually able to secure arson charges for both buildings on him through a confession on his side. So there will come a time where you have to do the process. And we started with the dentist office of who the dentist was. We called him. He referred us to another person. That person referred us to another person who referred us to another person who then referred us back to the original dentist who said, "Oh yeah, I do own those properties." So it becomes apparent that, you know, you just kind of have to go with what people tell you and you just dig and keep digging until you find what you need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that clears it up.
Okay. So Cody, just to answer your question, yeah, you can always start with CAD, but CAD's going to probably lead you to, if it's like a commercially owned business, it might say that it's Sunshine Properties LLC, Los Angeles, California. Okay. Well, then you're going to have to get on Google and look up who Sunshine Properties LLC is, and then call their persons, and then work that angle to get the person that you'll get a person that you need. Happens with dumpster fires a lot too, like Republic Waste. You might have to call their corporate office, and then they'll refer you to somebody in their parts division who'll then refer you back to a vice president, who'll then refer you over to somebody else. But you'll get somebody, once you tell them that you're with a fire investigative person and it caused damage to their property, then that person, once they say, "Yes, I'm willing to pursue charges against them," then you can move forward.
Is that always the case where you have to have the owner say, I would like to press charges? I mean, if the fire department personnel literally seeing the person set the building on fire, you still have to contact?
Yes. Yes. So you have the credible witness as your fire department that says, "Yes, I can identify them by sight and sound and by sight and by physical appearance." But you have to have a complainant. Arson is one of the few crimes that's against a person. So you have to have a person. If you don't have it, it's not like a DWI where the state of Texas can be the complainant. We have to have a complainant. So you have to have a person, an actual person that's willing to come to court and testify that they are willing to pursue charges against the person or persons responsible for damaging their property.
What if it's like a TCQ or environmental concern?
So in that respect, you would have to get the law enforcement liaison and or the person that is responsible for that area and see if they would be willing to act on behalf of TCEQ. Anything I missed?
Interesting.
Norm?
Not that I can think of on that.
I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's the investigative process. I mean, we get called out, you see there's a fire, you investigate it, you ask your questions, you look at it, and you try to fit it in those 4 categories. And if they don't fit, or there's nothing there that fits, then it becomes undetermined. You write up your report and you move on to the next one.
There's not always going to be an answer.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing is that, I mean, you could have 300 fires in a given year, and there's going to be a handful that you feel everything in your body is telling you that this is an intentionally set fire, but you can't say that the items first ignited, you can't put the ignition source, and you can't bring the actor agency that brought them together. So it's gonna happen.
Yep. More often than not.
Moving on. Any other questions on that? Anybody got any?
Might be a weird question,
No.
but what if you contact the property owner and he doesn't want to press charges, but there's a possibility that the property owner had something to do with the building being set on fire?
Okay. So now you've got fraud. Okay.
Yep.
So now you have what we call what you'll like to hear in the if you ever watch Forensic Files or anything like that, you'll hear arson for profit. Okay. So if there's a pecuniary interest, which means that you have a financial interest in that property, and through your investigation, you've determined that this guy's like way behind on his rent. He hadn't paid his bills in like 8 months. He's actually made some furtive statements on like Facebook or Twitter or something saying, I'm going to burn this whole place down, or something like that. Then yeah, you can, even if he is the owner, you can go through the state in that respect and get insurance fraud brought against him.
So that makes the case kind of easier if you can prove all that stuff.
If you can, yeah. And then of course that comes into your interview process as well. Like you'll interview him, and you could literally get the vibe when you're interviewing him that, man, something ain't right. And so then you get him to write down a statement, in which he lies. Well, that's a governmental record, right? It's admissible in court, right? So if he lies on that, then you can tell him, okay, well, you read it and you're like, man, you sure? And if he says, yeah, I'm sure, that just solidifies your case to go to the DA and say, look, I got insurance fraud. This is the guy, and I'm sure he had one of his, either him said it or he had somebody said it for him. This is the evidence I have. And then you present your case, and then it's up to the DA.
And a lot of it's circumstances too. I had a case when I worked in Stafford that when we started looking back at insurance records, this woman had 4 houses burned in 5 years, and it was the 5th house that had burned in 5 years, and she profited on every one of them, and that's how we ended up getting her, because she was burning them, getting insurance money, that kind of thing. Circumstantial until we could find the evidence.
I will say this, your gut's going to tell you, if you feel it's wrong, it's probably wrong. Okay. So,
but not everything's wrong.
Yeah. But also don't look at everything like it's arson either. So like if you're a hammer and you're looking for a nail, everything becomes a nail. Let the circumstances of it, let the investigation bring out what it is it's trying to tell you, because every fire will tell you a story. It's up to you to interpret the story.
I just try to remember, there's no law against being stupid.
That's truth.
Greetings, you find.
No, you're good.
And I guess to follow up on my previous question about like TCEQ, what about that owner who does burn down his house and says I burned down my house, but doesn't have insurance and just doesn't want to clean it up? That's
So
his way of cleaning up.
So there is no rule against burning your own stuff, okay? However, it does not relieve him of the environmental crime of burning building materials
Or hurting other people's property.
or damaging other people's property. So he could actually be charged if he damaged somebody else's property, a fence, another house, or anything like that. He could actually be charged with reckless arson.
Fire truck coming to him.
Yeah. So there are some regulatory things that through TCEQ you can get and all of that, but yeah, there's no law against you burning your own stuff, but you can't damage other people's property either. Does that make sense? Everybody tracking?
It makes sense.
Good. Good. All right, moving on to scene security. How many people have suppression experience? Anybody
do.
actively fight fire, was a fireman, is a fireman?
Currently an active firefighter.
I'm a fireman right now. New York Fire.
Okay.
I'm from Houston.
I was with Stafford for 17 years. I just recently retired actually. But one of the things, like, you know, there you'll see the memes or like the cartoons. Who's the cartoonist in Firehouse? I want to say it's Conway, but I know that's not right.
Paul Combs. Paul Combs.
Yeah. So you'll also, I remember one way back in the day was like, he said, it said evidence eradication team.
That's true.
You know, and it was the first line fireman. You know, it's like, okay, well, we're gonna go put out the fire. Now we're gonna pull off every stitch of sheetrock, floor to ceiling, and open up everything. Well, that destroys patterns that could be used in your fire investigation. Okay, so this chapter talks about minimizing fire suppression and overhaul activities. I want the fire out. Okay, when I go, I don't want to walk in a bunch of smoke, and I don't want to walk in a bunch of heat either. So I want the fire out, but I also want there to be some preservation of some patterns, especially if you tell me that, you know, hey, there was a beautiful V pattern right here on this wall, and then I come there and all I see are 2x4s. See what I'm saying? So it happens. Don't get me wrong, but try and minimize the amount of damage or the amount of stuff that's thrown over or tossed over or whatever. Be kind of methodical about how you're doing your job, or at the very least, try and remember how things were positioned when you entered that room. But the main thing is that after the fire's out, don't let nobody else in the house until fire investigators get there. That's the main thing. People always, especially homeowners, they're experiencing, and some to remember, they're experiencing the worst day of their life. That's everything they've worked for. That's everything they own. That is everything in that house. And if they see a bunch of firemen throwing pictures and beds out the window, probably not the best picture for them, even though we know on the suppression side that that's how we need to do our job. But they also want to go back in and get pictures off the wall, or they might have money or things of that nature. Just have your chief officer, whoever it is, say, look, you know, run the fire line tape around the perimeter, and just only allow fire suppression folks past that line. They're gonna, because we've got to preserve that scene. Make sense?
Yes, it does.
One thing I always ask when I show up, I always like to interview the first in company. I always like to know who was the first nozzleman through the door. And the first question I ask is, what were the heat conditions like? Was it banking you to the floor? Was it smoky? Were you able to walk through and walk right to the seat of the fire? What were you seeing? And things like that.
There's not much in this chapter, really.
Mm-hmm.
Just remember, it has to be secured all the way around. And if
Yes.
people come into your scene, they're going to spoil your scene. So you have to make sure that scene is secured all the way around. The best thing to do is put people there if you can, to keep outsiders out, basically.
What I've seen done in the past is like some fire departments will put firemen in the backyard with a hand line. They may not be flowing it, but they're just standing there. They're holding the scene. They're not allowing people in and out because it's active fire suppression. Make sense? So it's just a way to keep a perimeter, and it also allows those firemen to because I'll normally ask them, be like, hey, how long y'all back here? Chief told us to stay back here to hold the scene. Awesome. Anybody come back here? Nope. Okay. So now I've got a good scene that's being held, right? And then that way we're not allowing a lot of people to come in and out.
You have to understand correlation and contamination and that kind of thing, which comes up later on in the class. But a lot of that has to do with scene security.
Also,
how do you handle as far as allowing a homeowner or whatever to retrieve personal items or to come in? I know that a lot of times they want to see how bad is it, things like that. Or can I get my cell phone or my car keys, or there's cash under the bed, things like that.
So what I do in that respect is that I won't allow them to take clothing out of the house. I won't allow them to take their medication.
You will or you won't?
I will not.
Okay.
Because one, clothing, it's fibers, right? And the smoke permeates the fibers. It has to be specially treated in a special washing machine. And even then, if it's gotten any type of heat damage, it'll rot the seals of where the seams of the clothing. It'll just fall apart. So I just leave all their clothing, all their pictures. What I tell them is like, here's the deal, and I'll document that I went back in the scene with them, and they took money, they took gold, they took jewelry, they took this from this room, and then I photograph it in place. Then I photograph it after they've removed it, and I photograph it in their hands, because that way they can't come back on me, the fire department, or anybody else and say that we walked out of there with like 30 grand worth of their stuff. No, I make them lay it all out. I take pictures of it, and I document that it was that they were allowed to take these items from the house, because it also allows the private investigator to know that they were allowed to retrieve items of value. Also, too, I'll let them take their guns and things like that, because I don't want to leave guns unsecured in a house. Now, that being said, if it was in the room of origin and those guns have been burnt, and they will stay. I'll document them, and they'll stay, because there's no reason to remove that from the scene. But if it's a simple room and contents fire where it started in a kitchen and they're gonna have to be out of there for 5 days, I'll let them get like I'll let them get a laptop, I'll let them get a cell phone if they've left it there, their car keys, and then jewelry and things of value. I'll let them retrieve that. But that is up to you as the investigator of what you'll allow them to take out and all that. But anything they remove from the scene has to be documented anyway. So it's up to you. It's a judgment call. Going back to the bedroom with the 7 cans of gasoline in it. After that fire's been put out, I'll probably make the request if I'm talking with the chief on the phone before I get there. I'll be like, hey, make sure you put somebody outside that room. Don't let nobody in that room at all. No other firemen, nobody. Put him outside and don't let and restrict access to that room until I can get there. That's acceptable as well. Oh, and as a side note, every fire will get what I call vultures. These are restoration people. Kick them off your scene immediately. They have no business being there. They're just preying on innocent people. And if the people have insurance of the house, the restoration folks will, the people that are contracted through the insurance company will actually seek you out and provide you documentation. They'll provide you a claim number. They'll provide you the insurance company they're working for and their people. The other folks will be like, oh, we just heard on the radio and came over and see if we could help. No, they need to go. Because they'll be sneaky too, and they'll try and get around the perimeter and they'll start taking pictures and all that stuff. It better off just saying, hey, it's an active crime scene. Y'all need to leave. And if they don't, if SO's there or your local municipal police department's there, you've told them to leave. They're not leaving. They're now trespassing on your scene and impeding a criminal investigation. So, just food for thought.
Have those type of people ever damaged any evidence on your scene?
No, because when I generally get to them, I came from another agency where I learned that trick from. So as soon as I see them, I'm like, who are you with? Oh, I'm with Blackman Mooring. You need to leave. Okay. Now, they may not leave like totally from the neighborhood. They might go 3 blocks over and wait, but I get them out of my line of sight so that they can't harass these people that are literally having the worst day of their life.
How do you deal with the information and even the evidence you may collect in reference to giving that to the private insurance companies? What does that look like?
Oh, okay. So for us, if they want our evidence or anything like that, if it's a criminal case, they're not going to get access to our evidence. We'll just tell them that we have evidence, and that's it. We're going to give them a copy of our report, which won't be the full report. It'll be what anybody that asks through Freedom of Information Act gets, but it'll just be like, we came out and did a fire investigation, and that's it. If they want our evidence, they're going to get it at court.
And they get the evidence after everything's said and done?
Yeah.
If there's a ruling.
Yeah. So what'll happen is that they'll come, we'll do our investigation, we'll collect our evidence, we'll document it, we'll photograph it, we'll remove it from the scene, we'll put it in our evidence collection, our evidence room here at Tascasita. From that point, it then goes through the evidence collection process. Once it's done through that process, it's taken to the Forensic Institute downtown. It's analyzed, and then that report is generated. Once that report is generated, then they usually request they'll usually request that report, which says all they're looking for is whether there was flammable liquids present or not present. but we try to be helpful with those guys because, you know, especially in the criminal side of it, they have access to labs and things like that that will help us in our investigation as well. So we try to work closely with the insurance investigators as well, especially if we're securing criminal charges. Because if we're doing that, then they'll give us anything we want. Like if we need to get cell phone information from the owner, they'll give it to us, and things like that. Because they don't have to follow the same rules that we have to. So insurance, in order to have insurance, you basically sign away your rights, and it says that they'll do an examination under oath, which means that you have to tell them the truth. If you want to get paid, you have to participate in this examination under oath, and they can ask you whatever they want. Whereas we're bound by the law. So there's some things we can and can't do. On theirs, since they're a financial body and they're insuring your property, they have to get everything out of you that they can. So they can become a good asset. So we try to be as helpful as possible.
Do you ever work scenes simultaneously as them, as far as digging?
As far as dig it, no. So those guys generally work a week to 2 weeks behind us, but they basically, once they get assigned a case, they work it until completion, and then that's done. So they could spend up to 4 weeks on a call, whereas I might spend 12 hours on a scene and then that's it. So he might come back and say, hey, well, did you look at this? And I'm like, yeah, I looked at that, but did you look at this? And then, no, I didn't see that, but did you see this? Yes, but this is what this guy is telling me. And so we'll have these discussions. And so then they'll go to their insured and they'll go and interview the person that was, say they were using a piece of equipment and it caught fire, right? And it comes back that, oh, well, he was operating it too close to a burn pit. Well, land clearers do this on a regular basis. It's not uncommon to have an excavator or a track hoe be within 10 feet of a burning pile because they're throwing logs into this burn pit because they're clearing off land, right? Well, it becomes a problem when that piece of equipment catches on fire due to the fact that it was in close proximity to a burn pile. So you could get into some technical issues, but it becomes on you to go back to your pictures and to go back to your investigation and go, yeah, but I saw this was broken. I saw this was broken. This piece was this was this, and this was this. And then that allows them to go, okay, well, it's an accident, but he shouldn't have been doing this. I was like, well, there's no law against being stupid, but you know, I agree with you. But in my thing, I was just trying to find out if there was a crime committed. There wasn't, but now there was an accident. So that's where your relationship with those guys can come into play. Did that answer your question, Adam? Awesome. But as far as working hand in hand with them, no. But I have done interviews with them simultaneously. I've worked with the ATF on 2 cases now. One was a mosque fire. One was the ITC plant. You know, so working side by side with a federal agency, it's really neat to work with them because it's basically like, here's everything that's available to you, up to and including engineers, tractors, bulldozers, excavators, everything. Labs open up to you, like the NIST lab in Maryland opens up to you. I mean, partnerships and relationships matter in this job. So there's a lot
to
of
get them involved. Is that something that they kind of say, hey, I'm coming to play in your sandbox, or is that something you have to request?
So as with all federal entities, they have to be requested because they have no jurisdiction because of the Constitution with the federal separation of powers. They do have automatic involvement when it comes to interstate commerce.
So you have a big corporation, like a plant or something like that, or something that might cause damage to federal property. Yeah, they'll be there.
Or if it interrupts a ship channel,
yep,
they're coming. There's no question about it. They're going to be coming. But also too, you can call on them too if your resources are so limited. You can ask for their help, and they'll come help you. There's nothing. I mean, the ATF has a specific division that are nothing but arson investigators, and
the state has that too.
And the state has it as well. So I mean, you can utilize your resources. If you're in a city and you can't do a certain item, reach out to your county and say, hey, do y'all have any investigators available? And if they have them, they'll come help you. If they don't, then reach out to the state. If they can't help you, then of course reach out to the federal guys. We're here to help each other. That's what this is all about.
Yeah, our community uses Tim Ware with the State Fire Marshal's Office very frequently, especially since y'all just stole our last peace officer. So.
Okay. Where you at?
From Huntsville.
Oh, okay. Huh? Yeah. I mean, if you want us to help, we'll come help. Why not?
Okay. Y'all can send Parker back up here. I think he's one of your new guys that just left here. One of you guys.
Got hired. Sure did. Any other questions from anybody? I know that's pretty quick, but
I've got a question about the documentation.
Yeah.
Helmet cams and the maybe digital cameras that are carried on some apparatus. If an initial company is there and they take those pictures, is that admissible? Or can that be linked into the pictures that y'all take when you get there?
So
say if the same was
Lieutenant,
and take that wall out for that V pattern, if they took pictures of that, can that be correlated into your case?
yes. So Lieutenant Hilton will cover that in detail. She's going to handle documentation for you. But just know that any camera, and this is not just into the rule of fire investigation. This is in any scene. It's come out through the state that anything dealing with any scene can be subpoenaed for use in court. Your phones, apparatus-mounted cameras, privately owned video cameras, privately owned helmet cameras, any device that records anything in any way can be subpoenaed. And if it's destroyed, even by any count, and she'll go over this further, that could open up some liabilities for the person that destroys evidence as relating to that case. Does that answer your question, Mr. Stewart?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Good to go.
Good to go. Awesome. Any other questions? Anything anybody might have that I didn't cover, or anything you can think of?
Actually, I do have a question.
Okay.
We were talking about the ATF coming on scene. Who would assume would control the scene be with the I guess the authority having jurisdiction, or would it be the ATF, or who would control, or just work together? Or
so ultimate control would lie with the authority having jurisdiction. The ATF is just considered a resource at that point. They would be in joint it would be a joint collaboration. And that would be up to the authority having jurisdiction to determine what part they would play. You know, and that would be up to them. But the authority having jurisdiction is the overall incident commander of the scene.
Okay.
Any other questions? I want to thank
No,
Jim
sir.
for coming out today, Lieutenant Hargraves, and Lieutenant Hilton. She'll be talking next week on chapters 8, 9, and 10. So she's really good at what she does too. I appreciate you guys doing that. Let me look and see. There were a couple of questions in here. Can you read those?
Yeah, the mic doesn't work on her computer.
Oh, okay. All right, no problem. There's nothing we need to answer there. So I appreciate you guys doing that. Hopefully we'll see you again next week with Lieutenant Spencer.
Spencer Hilton, yeah.
Yeah, I got to remember, she just changed her name. So, but you guys take it easy and have a good weekend, okay?
Thank y'all. Good luck.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.